Before that guy could react to the situation, Liu Zhen rode on him and started to beat him. Despite she's a woman, her strength was no less than a male. Hello everyone, I'm Min. Welcome to my channel. I have covered 2 serial killer gangs in my previous videos. Their cruelty and sexual perversion were simply outrageous. But this case I want to discuss today was seriously messed up, and oddly enough, his freaky actions weren't just driven by sex. Well, let's start today's case. Here is a very strange character, like that. Even the biggest dictionary in China couldn't identify this mysterious word left behind at a greasy murder scene. It was on the victim's corpse. The killer carved it on the victim's back with a sharp tool. In the eyes of all the investigators who witnessed the scene, this character that almost no one could understand its meanings, like a bizarre and mysterious symbol, contained important clues left deliberately yet partly concealed by the killer. As long as its origin and flow were decrypted, the truth of the case would be revealed. The case happened when a pandemic sweeping the world, which was 20 years ago. The SARS greatly affected China. Most of us, the ordinaries, only wanted to stay safe and sound under the influence of the pandemics. But those with evil intents wouldn't think like us. Mid-June in 2003, Jinzhou City in Liaoning province, there's this rumor spread among the people. It is said that there was this psychopathic killer, specifically targets women, roams the streets and alleys, and can easily sneak into other people's homes, commit murders, and then left without a trace. At first, this seems to be just an unfounded urban legend. But in the eyes of the local police officers, this is not an entirely groundless rumor. In fact, there really was such a psychopathic killer, and the police were also indignant and racking their brains to catch him. Going back in time for about 2 weeks, the devil deeds started from that time. The victim's name was Lin Yan, 31 years old, a female teacher at a nearby middle school. On weekdays, she lived alone in a dormitory not far from the school in Jinzhou City. On the morning of the 31st of May, her husband found the corpse when he delivered meals to her. According to the forensics, Lin Yan's time of death was around 1 a.m. that day. Lin Yan's residence was on the top floor of a 6-story building. There was nothing unusual about the surrounding environment. Nobody could have imagined that someone would have died in this violent way there. When the police entered the crime scene for the first time, they immediately determined that it was a homicide. The scene was in chaos, with beer bottles and cans scattered around on the bed, and half-eaten apples, randomly thrown on the floor. It was a really massive flat with not only leftover food but also a deck of poker cards scattered on the floor. Lin Yan, the victim, was lying on the bed with a blanket covered on her. She was all naked except she was wearing stockings and slippers. When the police uncovered the blanket, it was very horrible to look at. There were dozens of cuts on her body, and she seemed to die of that cut slashed through her throat. And according to the forensics, despite there were cuts on her pubic area, there weren't signs of her being raped. They couldn't retrieve any sperms or DNA traces within that flat either. But the most disturbing thing was that she had this character carved in her back. You can see from the picture here, all the strokes were neat and clear. They don't look like they were carved under stress or in a hurry. And according to the victim's husband, she didn't have this thing on her before, so it's highly likely left by the murderer. Judging from the scene, it looks like the murderer actually did take his time enjoying the killing. He's not nervous at all after killing the victim. He spent at least 2 hours hanging out with the body. The leftover foods and poker cards scattering around He could be drinking beers and ate some apples after carving that letter or character on her back. Just only imagining what this murderer was doing in my head disgusted me. The police, or let's say most of us Chinese, couldn't recognize this very character carved to the victim. So the police had to dig through all the available dictionaries in China. We have this Xinhua Dictionary, which is the most influential and authoritative dictionary, but they couldn't find this word or character there. They stuck until someone brought up that they might want to look for this character in other ancient or older dictionaries. Lucky them to find the definition of this character in Kangxi Dictionary, which is the earliest Chinese dictionary with phonetic transcriptions and was commissioned by the Kangxi Emperor during the year of 1710 to 1716. It is pronounced as Miao. It's another way of writing of this character, also pronounced as Miao. The meaning of this character in the central region of China is gentle, beautiful, and is used to describe pretty girls. However, in Fujian area, this character is used as a term for prostitutes. So was this murderer was trying to hint that the victim was a sex worker? But after investigations of the victim, the police confirmed that the victim was just an ordinary woman, working in their most ordinary careers. Like she was a middle school teacher and that's it. She was no way a sex worker. Since the murderer slandered a woman like that, did he have some kind of hatred towards women? This could be a clue to solving the case. But the murderer was no ordinary people. He had a strong anti-investigation consciousness. Entering Lin Yan's dormitory was easy for him. The door lock was not an obstacle at all. After coming and going, the doors and windows were still intact. After committing the crime, he did not forget to carefully wipe off all the footprints or fingerprints could have been left at the scene. Police also believe that the stockings and shoes on Lin Yan's feet were deliberately put on by the murderer after Lin Yan's death in order to disguise the murder scene. After repeated inspections of the scene, the police finally unfold a way the murderer entering the flat. Lin Yan lived on the 6th floor, and there's a footprint on the awning of the balcony on the 5th floor. The awning was right below Lin Yan's balcony, and they checked with the neighbors. No one lived nearby would step out of this top of the awning like that. So it's possible that it was left by the murderer. When he stepped onto the awning and flipped into the flat on the night of the incident, Lin Yan's husband also testified that his wife had this habit of leaving the windows open for summer nights. It was precisely this little negligence that allowed the murderer to easily break into her flat. Jinzhou is a small place. During the police investigation of the case, rumors spread like wings throughout the city. It's said that the murderer had grown wings and flew into the rooms to kill people. Some said that the murderer would continue to commit crimes, targeting women who were alone at home. The business of installing burglar-proof nets was booming. Every household was planning to install these burglar-proof nets or iron railings on the balcony. Those who did not install those things did not dare to sleep with their windows open at night anymore, even though it was during the hot summer nights, when people around them paid unprecedented attention to balcony burglar-proof methods. This phenomenon finally attracted the attention of the police in the right direction one day. Breaking in from the balcony, single middle-aged women, similar modus operandi and targets. Hadn't they seen this a few times more than a month ago? So was it a serial killer they were dealing with? On the 3rd of May in 2003, it was another normal day of Chen Xiu's life. She was at her 30s, living in Jinzhou City. She's been living an easy, regulated life, alone, while working a typical everyday job. But that day, she was having this pen issue to finish at work, so she only started to traveling back home at about 8 p.m. It was a summer day, so it wasn't dark at all on her way home. Well, initially it was. So she wasn't worried or terrified or anything. Instead, she was having this light mood when she was heading home. Until she had these feelings, it's like someone was spying on her. Especially when she walked through a dark alley, she thought she heard these light steps behind her. But when she looked back, there was nothing. She could only see those bizarre shadows of indescribable shapes in the dark behind her. Of course, she was terrified. She hurriedly quickened her pace and ran all the way back to her residence. Not until she ran into the flat and closed the door did she take a long sigh of relief. Chen Xiu was still frightened, but thinking of the encounter just now, maybe she was just being paranoid, she thought. She comforted herself that it was nothing happened and she would go to bed early that night. And that's what she said. Even though Chen Xiu, an avid TV viewer, had just taken a shower, she still slouched herself onto the sofa as usual to watch her favorite daily drama. She was watching with great interest when suddenly there was a little noise from the balcony. Patted a sound as if someone had kicked something, which immediately woke her up from the plot. So she stood up and just about to walk to her balcony to check what was going on, right? But there was this man stepped out of the shadow wearing a black hood stood in front of her. Before she could comprehend the situation, that man suddenly moved closer. She ran to her front door the moment he moved. It's like a conditioned move or reflex. Her body moves before her head could figure out what was going on. As soon as she opened a tiny gap of the front door, that guy grabbed her clothes with one hand and grabbed her waist and tried to drag her back into the room. Although her head was buzzed, but Chen Xiu knew that she couldn't be, dragged back, so she struggled desperately. The man didn't expect that a woman could exert so much strength in a critical moment like this. While he was holding her with both his hands, so when she used all his energy to crawl out of the door, both fell to the ground outside of the front door. Chen Xiu struggled and screamed for help. The loud noise of the two falling to the floor and Chen Xiu's call for help finally attracted the attention of the neighbors next door. A neighbor finally opened the door to check out what was going on. Upon seeing the neighbors about to show up, the perpetrator immediately ran off. And later on, the frightened Chen Xiu reported to the police with her neighbors accompanied her. The police arrived at her home and inspected the situation, finally concluded that the perpetrator entered the flat from the balcony. It was lucky that Chen Xiu was watching TV at the time when the perpetrator broke into her place. If she was in a sleep, but because Chen Xiu was terrified when it all happened, she couldn't get a clear look of this guy's face. What she can remember was that this guy was quite short. As a man, he was about the same height as Chen Xiu, a girl. And it happened in 2003. CCTVs weren't popular within residential areas. So that's all the police knew about this case with Chen Xiu. A man broke into her flat from her balcony, but no DNAs, no face, no nothing. With too little information like that, they couldn't make a further investigation. On the 18th of May 2003, Liu Zhen, a resident of a sixth-floor flat, also reported an unexpected intruder to the police. She was a vice professor at the university living alone, and she was at her 40s. That day, she was cycling back home from her mother's place. The daughter and mother spent a happy weekend together. Then it was about 8 p.m. when she arrived home. Since Liu Zhen was about to catch a cold, she decided to walk to a nearby pharmacy. After getting the medicine, Liu Zhen went to a public square and watched the aunties dancing and singing for a while. She only started to walk home when they all left, and because the next day was a work day. Liu Zhen had to go to work, so she went sleeping after washing up, and the flat with the lights off, it was quiet. No one would have thought that a crime was brewing quietly. After dozing off for a while, Liu Zhen woke up gasping for air. She felt it very difficult to breathe, as if someone was choking her. Liu Zhen hastily opening her eyes, although it was pitch dark. She clearly felt that there really was someone riding on her, choking her with one hand, and covering her mouth with the other. Liu Zhen struggled. The person riding on her realized that Liu Zhen had woken up. He lowered his head and threatened in a low voice in Liu Zhen's ear, saying something like he was about to choke her to death. It was a voice of a stranger, and if it were others, they could have been terrified to lose sanity. But Liu Zhen was a tough and brave woman. Although she couldn't make out a sound, she replied to this guy silently. "You want to choke me? I'll kill you first." Liu Zhen bursted out and threw that man to the floor. Before that guy could react to the situation, Liu Zhen rolled on him and started to beat him. Despite she's a woman, her strength was no less than a male. When she was beating that guy, she also shouted for her son. Her son was 21 years old at that time, just attending university. He wasn't home often though. That night he just happened to stay home for some other reasons. Hearing the noises came from his mother's room. Of course, he would want to check out what was going on. But when the son was about to enter in the room, the perpetrator also bursted out all his strength to throw over the woman and fled away from the front door of that flat. He left a wooden stick behind, though he wouldn't dare to retrieve it. During the combat between Liu Zhen and the perpetrator, she pulled off the hood that man was wearing. The black hood was not some professional criminal tool. It's just a black vest with two holes cut out in the front and sealed around the cuffs with tapes. I kept saying that it's a hood, but judging from the description, I thought that would be a balaclava. But I kept thinking of the hood when I recorded it, which is like a plain translation to the corresponding Chinese word. It looked as it was casually put on and very crude. The night was pitch dark, and the faint moonlight was not enough for Liu Zhen to make out the attacker. It was a pity though. Liu Zhen could tell it was a short man, about 160 centimeters tall. When they told the incident to the police, there was this really strange detail that sounds ridiculous. When the man escaped, he ran past the son, and the son didn't know what was going on, so he was all confused to see a man running out of his mother's bedroom. That guy said thank you and briefly handshake the son. The son was like, wow, and watching that man disappears behind their front door. Remember this case with Chen Xiu? Liu Zhen's case sounds exactly like her, except the fact that Liu Zhen beat the shit out of the perpetrator, of course. And the time of the crimes were quite close. The police thought that there must be some linkage, but there were very little evidence left at the scene on both cases. For the time being, the police were at a loss in the face of this elusive intruder, until Liu Yan's case was brought to the police. They knew right away that this guy became a serial killer. His modus operandi was aggravated. When the police organized information collected from these three cases, they had a rough sketch of this suspect. He was thin and small, with his height around 160 centimeters to 168 centimeters, and he was about 40s. Psychologically, he might have received some kind of stimulations in the past. He could have had a criminal record, a strong awareness of anti-investigation, and is very familiar with the geographical environment of the city. He was also good at climbing, and he was turning into a serial killer, which means he wouldn't stop until he was caught. So the local police literally had to patrol day and night, to shifts to watch out for the citizens. They took especial care to the residence of single women. But there was another intriguing case was reported to them on the 30th of June, 2003. The victim was identified as Liu Xian. She was a businesswoman at the age of 45, and she had separated with her husband for ages. Liu Xian only just moved in this new flat of hers a month ago. They discovered her death on the 30th of June, though according to the forensics, her time of death was 2 days ago on the 11th. Because her daughter had recently been dating and living with the boyfriend, Liu Zhongxian moved into this new flat herself, alone. Neighbors didn't know her well. They didn't have a deep impression of Liu Zhongxian. After all, she had just moved in less than a month ago. No one knew where she went or what she did at night. Only the neighbors right next door recorded that she could have been returned home at about 9 p.m. on the 11th. Liu Zhongxian didn't get killed immediately upon returning home. According to the neighbors, they heard the sounds of running waters and bathing. The police found her underwear placed neatly in the bathroom, which was correspond with what the neighbors had told. What exactly happened in the last few minutes of Liu Zhongxian's life, from taking a bath to going to bed and eventually dying unexpectedly? We couldn't know the full story anymore. What we saw was that she died miserably, like Lin Yan. She was killed by an axe found at the scene. Slash marks inflicted by the murderer were all over her face, and it was mutilated and disfigured. Through investigation, the police tried their best to reconstruct the terrible crime scene. It could be that night, the perpetrator followed her home. When she was taking bath and all that in her top floor flat, the killer was studying the surrounding environment of the place. So around midnight, when she just slipped through her dreams, he climbed into the balcony of their flat from the window at the entrance of the stairs along the gutter. And he had put newspapers on the floor in advance, just so he wouldn't leave his footprints behind this time. He raised the axe towards Liu Zhongxian while she was sleeping soundly. After he had done with the killing, he cleaned the scene thoroughly. To be specific, he even took the cloth to wipe off all the visible footprints and marks he left within the flat and the outdoor staircases. The police knew right away it was him, the same intruder from the cases above. After carefully inspecting the crime scene, the police couldn't find anything indeed about the killer. But they discovered that this sneaky bastard took something out of the scene, and this missing item became a breakthrough in the case. The victim's sister recalled that she was calling her sister in the morning of the 12th. Her sister was unable to pick up the phone, of course, since she was died by the time the call reached her. But the sister didn't know it right, as they naturally would inform the victim's daughter first. Anyway, the sister found it weird that Liu Zhongxian, the victim's phone, couldn't pull through for quite some time. The victim was a businesswoman, right? She wouldn't be unreachable like that. So the sister kept calling and messaging the victim. No one answered until about 9 a.m. on the 30th of June 2003. Liu Zhongxian's sister called again. This time actually pulled through. She was hollering to the phone quite a few times, but it was only silence came from the other side. Before she realized, the phone was hung up again. To this point, the sister still didn't know that, the victim was died, since the silence could be excused as some network errors. But Liu Zhongxian's sister started to worry, so she called again around noon the same day. This noon phone call worried her significantly. What came from the other end of the phone was not Liu Zhongxian's voice, but a noisy sound of clicking and roaring. She shouted into the phone a few times and finally someone spoke. But the response was a man with an out-of-town accent. She was asking the whereabouts of her sister. The man on the other side of the phone paused a bit, then replied some bullshit like, her sister was in Changchun City, which is very far away from where they lived, and her sister's phone was running out of usage. If she wanted to help, she might as well top it up for her sister. Then that guy hung up on her. The sister worried sick. Initially, she just thought that her sister could be kidnapped somehow. As you know, being a businesswoman, she was loaded in comparison to others. She couldn't wait any longer to report it to the police. But what she heard from the police was even worse and broke her heart to know that her sister was died by the time she was calling and calling. Good thing though, she offered this clue to the police that let them realize the victim had a phone that was missing from the crime scene. It's highly likely that the guy on the phone talking to the sister could be the murderer. According to those clicking and roaring sounds she heard from the background, the police figured that the murderer could have been on a train. Then they checked the mobile phone signal and finally located the phone in Shenyang. So, which train was the murderer taking? Court records show that the victim's sister called at 12:24 p.m. They checked the train timetable for the 12th and found that the train K641 running between Shanhaiguan and Shenyang was passing through the signal tower at that moment. Not that they had a train, but there were just too many passengers. Back in 2003, you didn't need to buy a train ticket with your ID cards. But it was after the pandemic of SARS. Like with the COVID-19, they required all passengers to fill out a sheet to travel, in which they needed to disclose their names, phone numbers, and residential details, etc. It was a temporary procedure to count with the pandemic, but it played a major role when solving this serial case. So was it the reason why we all have to buy train tickets with our ID cards after it? Through investigation, the police found that a total of 257 passengers boarded K641 at Jinjiang Station, including 159 males and 98 females. Relying on these 257 health cards, the police searched every person in the 16 carriages. That was a huge task. The police had to not only verify each health card against the name, phone number, and address, but also find the corresponding person, understand the reason why he or she went to Shenyang on the 13th of June, where he or she went after arriving in Shenyang, and most importantly, what he or she did on the night of the 11th of June. Soon, a man named Liu Yan came into the sight of the police. The reason was that among those 257 people, only he left a false address and false phone number. Why would he fake it if he didn't do anything wrong, right? And since the contact information was wrong, how could they reach this guy? Clueless though, the police decided to keep checking back on the past records. What if he had taken the train before, you know? Lucky guess, when they flipped through the health cards, they discovered this Liu Yang guy had actually been taking this particular train regularly. He went to Shenyang City in the morning and came back to Jinzhou City in the evening. Since the police didn't announce publicly about this clue, they bet the perpetrator wouldn't realize that they had caught his foxtail. Therefore, he would board on the same train soon, as he had been doing regularly. Once he got on the train again, he had to fill out a health card. So the police requested handwriting identification experts from the Provincial Public Security Bureau and stationed them at the ticket checkpoint to wait for Liu Yang's appearance. Not long did they wait. The guy with the matching handwriting appeared. Although this guy used another fake name, it's not Liu Yang anymore. He said he was Zhu Xu. Anyway, with the confirmation from the handwriting experts, the police took him in for questioning. Did they really catch him? The police thought so, though the survivor victims did not recognize him. After identification by the survivor victims and investigation of his whereabouts, he was not the murderer because he did not have the time to commit the crime, and there was ample evidence that he was not at the scene. The reason he used fake name to take the train, according to what Zhu Xu said, was just that he didn't want to pay for the train tickets. He was merely a salesman who sold medicine and had to travel between Shenyang City and Jinzhou City every day. To save some money, he borrowed his friend Liu Yan's train pass. Since this friend worked for the railway system, he can travel for free. With all this effort, the police caught a fare evader. While they at least made some contribution to the profit of the railway department, right? But they seemed to run into dead ends about finding the murderer. The police set up checkpoints all over Jinzhou City. They stationed cops at almost every building entrance in every neighborhood. The cops knew the suspects inside out and carried mobile phones with them for easy contact. Back in 2003, mobile phones weren't as common as now it is, so they did make an effort. Surveillance cameras monitored the train station 24/7, and cops patrolled there, paying extra care to every short guy that passed by. But even with all the settings above, the sneaky killer still got away. When the police carefully sorted all the leads they had in hand, they still got these feelings, that missing cell phone could have been a key to solve this case. They carefully searched the signal towers that the missing cell phone had passed through again, and eventually logged onto the last signal tower that the device had contacted, which was located near the Shenyang South railway station. After communicating with local police colleagues, they realized that within the coverage area of this signal tower was a locally well-known second-hand cell phone market. So they took on a trip and visited basically all the stall owners and discovered the missing phone finally in a shop. According to the shop owner, there's this middle-aged guy wanting to sell a mobile phone to him. The shop owner quoted a price to the man as usual, but the other party didn't accept it and left the store with the phone quickly. Before long, he came back again with the cell phone. After several interactions with the shop owner, the deal of the used phone was finally reached. Because the guy talked with the store owner for a while, not like his usual customers. So the shop owner still remembered how he looked when the cops showed up, asking questions. The shop owner clearly and explicitly described the appearance characteristics of the guy, less than 170 centimeters and moderately thin. The shop owner specifically pointed out his own speculation that the man's appearance looked older than his age, with dark skin, more like the image of a laid-off migrant worker at the time. The shop owner's account largely corresponded with those of several survivors regarding the killer. At this time, the police decided to abandon their preconceived ideas and no longer be misled by this passenger Liu Yan. They retracked the 257 passengers on the train K641. With such a clear description, the police finally screened out 13 key suspects, all of whom met the conditions of being around 40 years old, less than 170 centimeters tall, slightly thin, with tanned skin. Plus, the police did invite the shop owner to Jinzhou City to help them ID the men among 13 of those selected suspects. 13 of them stood in a row and appeared before the shop owner. Soon, the shop owner pointed to one of the men and positively identified this man as the one who had traded with him. Now that someone has been identified, the case should be solved, right? But the police learned from the accidents with the passenger Liu Yang last time and did not dare to just take the words of the shop owner solely. Instead, they immediately listed this person as a key target and investigated him thoroughly. But the result was disappointing. This guy had neither the time nor the evidence to commit the crime. The shop owner's identification alone could not be used as the only evidence to determine who was the suspect. So what next? Among the 13 suspects standing before the police, was there really a murderer? It's been half a month since the last murdered case was discovered. The police worried sick about another murder case was about to take place. Hearts jumped to throats every time picked up a reporting phone call. After going through a nerve-wracking period, no new cases occurred. This greatly encouraged the police because it might indicate that the killer was affected and changed his behaviors. So their searches and works were not in vain. They were close to the killer and made him feel the pressure. Perhaps the killer was indeed among these 13 key targets. The police were doubly confident and decided to conduct polygraph tests on these 13 key targets. The polygraph expert set up a total of 7 questions. 12 people passed the test successfully. Only one individual behaved abnormally in all 3 tests, and that was Xu Guizhu. Xu Guizhu was a local from Jinzhou City, aged 40, and he was 168 centimeters tall. He worked for the railway station before, but he was sentenced to re-education through labor twice for theft. In 1991, he was sentenced to 9 years in prison for theft again, so he lost his job and divorced his first wife. Now in 2003, he lives in Jinzhou City with his second wife, and the two had a 2-year-old child. Facing the police, Xu Guizhu did not say a word or utter a syllable. When he was asked about if he had gone out at the time of the crime, he answered no. When he was asked why he went to Shenyang City, he answered that he went to find someone called Zhang, who worked in the Shenyang Railway Bureau, and he was paying visit to this friend for help finding a job. The police interrogated him several times, but got nowhere. His wife similarly made various excuses for Xu Guizhu. When she was asked if Xu Guizhu often went out at night, his wife emphatically answered that he never went out at night. The answer was that she did not remember. So what kind of a person is this Xu Guizhu? The police had to bypass the couple and questioned people around them. Although he was unemployed, in the eyes of his family, Xu Guizhu was a good son, good husband, and a good father. He was most filial to his mother, obeying her in everything, every way. Whatever his mother said, he would do it without saying a word of disagreement. He also respected and loved his wife very much, treating her with courtesy. He was extremely affectionate to his children and never beat or scolded them. He has moral quotations and precepts that he wrote himself, posted everywhere in their home. A person with such refined morals and education could not possibly be a serial killer, or could he? Although his wife appeared panic-stricken, yet faked composure, arousing police suspicions of her deception. But this couple wouldn't change their stories at all. Legally, the results of a polygraph test could not determine Xu Guizhu's criminal culpability. They need other solid and conclusive evidence to make the arrest. Remember one of the victims, Liu Zhen? She pulled off the hood the perpetrator had worn. It did take the forensics quite a while to discover some short hairs and some sweat marks within that hood. Therefore, they could finally extract DNA from that hood and made a comparison of the intruder and Xu Guizhu. The testing results came out quickly to confirm that Xu Guizhu was indeed the perpetrator. Solid evidence like that, his wife couldn't hold up her stories anymore and finally confessed that her husband often left home at night and came back when it's bright. And this black vest the culprit used as a hood was actually bought by his wife. She had bought 2 sets of the same black vests. One was old and worn, so she used it as cloth to do houseworks. The other side of the vest was nowhere to be found at home. And when the hood was brought in front of Xu Guizhu's wife, she recognized that it was made from the very black vest that was said to be missing from home. Xu Guizhu said to the police that he only visited Shenyang City to hang out with his friend Zhang, but according to his wife, the two had not seen this friend Zhang for a long time. After conducting background checks, the police also proved that this friend Zhang had left the railway company long time ago, and there's no way the two were still contacting each other. So now that, with the wife's confessions and DNAs, the police was quite sure that Xu Guizhu was the murderer. But how come this shop owner of this second-hand cell phones didn't recognize him when he was brought to, point at the suspects? As it turned out, it was just a sheer coincidence. Xu Guizhu's teeth were hurting at the time, his gums were red and swollen, and there were big lumps on both sides of his cheeks, making his entire face look like an inverted triangle. The shopkeeper, who knew Xu Guizhu from just a few conversations, naturally could not recognize this disfigured man as the one who had sold him the mobile phone at the time. But good thing that Xu Guizhu couldn't get away anyway. The police interrogated Xu Guizhu again with all the evidence in hand. Xu Guizhu was unwilling to answer at first and responded to every question with silence. As the interrogation deepened, he finally opened his mouth, but his confession changed every day. At first, he denied it, but later he admitted that he had killed someone, but was unwilling to reveal the details of the crime. When he wanted to reveal the details, he denied leaving any physical evidence behind. His constant self-contradiction revealed Xu Guizhu's inner turmoil to the police. Xu Guizhu confessed that he usually followed the victims to their places until late at night when everything was quiet. Then he would break in through the balcony in various ways to commit the crime. The reason why he knew how to wipe off fingerprints and shoe prints was something he had learned during his previous 12 years in prison. Well, he was re-educated twice and 9 years in prison, so that counted to 12 years in total in jail. He confessed easily that he had killed 2 people. For the fact that he had killed 2 people, Xu Guizhu readily admitted, but once it came to words like sexual perversion and pervert, he became unwilling to speak again. He lowered his head, frowned, and sighed, just wouldn't say anything about it. Until the 15th of July, Xu Guizhu finally reacted to questions about the sexual side of his crimes. He said he acted alone, though he suddenly spit out words like the following: "You can accuse me of killing, but you can't call me a pervert. I didn't rape any of the cops at all." The chief interrogating police officer didn't raise a brow at Xu Guizhu's rather fierce reaction. Instead, he asked calmly why Xu Guizhu would commit the crimes. He said it was just a way to appreciate the death, but he gave no explanations for why he carved that character, Miao, onto the victim's back, and why he played cards with the deceased, given no reason either for why he started the killing. He said in the end that, quoted, "You will never get to know me," unquoted. He regarded this as a secret to show off, and only he alone enjoyed this covert pleasure. On the Christmas of 2003, Xu Guizhu was sentenced to death. The threat of SARS had already passed over China, and the snowflakes flowing down from the heavens above northeast China blanket the dark earth year after year. Xu Guizhu remained hardened in heart until death and met a devil's end. Today's story ends here. I used to read materials frequently in an attempt to analyze the psychological factors of these abnormal maniacs. But later I thought that as normal people, even if we read materials, we cannot empathize with these abnormal thoughts. There is no need to worry about why they commit crimes. Instead, we should focus on fairness, justice, and education. We should educate the public about inappropriate and unlawful behaviors. This is to stop more people from turning in crime. People need to know what actions are wrong and prohibited. This knowledge might help them to steer away from a life of lawlessness. But I know not all the criminals would change from education, though they should know what consequences they would have to deal with when they broke the laws. On the other hand, law enforcement agencies should indeed strengthen their analysis and handling of cases to achieve fairness and justice. Just like the police in today's story, no matter how much they suspect someone, no matter how logical their reasoning seemed, they would not rush to judge without physical evidence. After all, false confessions were probably not uncommon in the handling of past cases. And if you can't enjoy the story today, please like and subscribe. I will see you in the next one. The police searched every person in the 16 carriages. That was a huge task.